When I first start getting into a long-running series, I try to consistently play through the entries available. The problem with that, with regards to Dragon Quest, is that after I played Dragon Quest XI's, there was not a single other Dragon Quest game on PC for me to play. That did finally change last year when Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake came out, but it did still take me a while to get to the game with my gaming schedule. A gift from my friend prompted me to action, and I'm glad I played it now because not only was it a fun time, but now I'm well set up for the upcoming Dragon Quest I and II remakes as well. The original Dragon Quest III, The Seeds of Salvation, is a turn-based RPG developed by Chunsoft and published by Enix, both before they merged with other companies. The game came out in Japan in 1988 for the NES, but it took until 1992 for it to make it to North America under the name Dragon Warrior 3. Since then, there have been quite a few re-releases and remakes. The first was the 1996 SNES release that only came to Japan, then a Game Boy Color release in 2000 for Japan and 2001 for North America, and a mobile release in 2009 also exclusive to Japan. The Wii got an emulated re-release in 2011 only for Japan. iOS and Android got a worldwide release in 2014, which was the first time Dragon Quest III was available to Europe as well as North America. The last release is before the most recent remake, with the Japan-only 3DS and PS4 releases in 2017 and the worldwide Switch release in 2019. While many of these re-releases added some features, I think it's safe to say the HD-2D remake offered the most new features. Coming out in 2024 for PC, Switch, PS5, and the Xbox Series, Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake added so much. In the first draft of the script, I started listing them all out, but the list became way too long. To summarize, there is not a single part of the game that was untouched. There are new story moments, new enemies and ally abilities, voiceover and orchestrated soundtrack, and lots of UX changes. The one subtraction is the Treasures and Trapdoors minigame added in the SNES release that has been replaced by a monster recruiting and monster arena battling minigame. When it comes to reception and sales, it is hard to underestimate the impact Dragon Quest III has had on Japan. The original sold 1 million copies in its first day on its way to being the best-selling game of Japan in 1988, and is responsible for future Dragon Quest games only being released on Saturdays from then on to avoid the rash of truant students and sick days for employees. No, Japan didn't actually pass a law about it, because they didn't have to. The company decided to make the change. While subsequent re-releases didn't sell the 3.8 million Dragon Quest III did in 1988, they did pretty well, and the HD-2D remake sold over 2 million copies worldwide by a month after release. Dragon Quest III has also been reviewed very well over the years, with the gameplay getting the strongest praise and ranking as one of the most beloved RPGs in Japanese polls. It is little surprise that when the Dragon Quest Hero was released for Smash, the Dragon Quest III version was one of the 4 version options. This game is considered a timeless classic, and the remake hopefully lived up to that reputation. Dragon Quest III takes place in the land of Aldrant, where our hero, you can choose their gender, is born the child of the great hero Ortega in the kingdom of Alyahan. On your 16th birthday, you are summoned to the castle to begin your journey following in the steps of your father on a quest to defeat the Archfiend. You will recruit fellow party members and travel across the land on this quest, finding out more about what Ortega did after he left home, and tackling the Archfiend's minions on your way to taking down the Fiend himself. When it comes to story, Dragon Quest III is very bare bones, but in a purposeful way. The protagonist is silent, and all the characters you recruit are silent as well, apart from the occasional utterance in battle. You customize them with appearance and name. Even for those who come with default names, you can change them later in the game. In fact, many of the characters you do encounter who help you along the way are referred to just as their role, like your mother and grandfather, or the various rulers. The boss enemies are more likely to have distinct names than the people you are encountering on the journey. While that means no deep character exploration, which, if you know me and the RPGs I love, is a big appeal to me, it does mean the game focuses more on the gameplay and the sheer adventure of the tale. There's still intrigue and developments, but your role is savior and observer, not anything more than that. You observe others' problems, and you come in to solve them. For those who don't know, Dragon Quest III is also a prequel for the first 2 Dragon Quest games, which is partly why this game got a remake before 1 and 2. Just how much that connection will be emphasized is to be seen, especially since 1 and 2 are likely going to be more pronounced in that sense as games later down the timeline, but I'm sure some generous original Dragon Quest III players can highlight what the remake has brought in on the story side in the comments. As for gameplay, you have your player character who you can name, but will always be the vocation of hero. It's a pretty good place to be in since you get a lot of uniquely powerful abilities, but you alone are likely not going to be able to complete this journey, so the game will give you some other companions. The ones the game gives you right out the gate are a warrior, a mage, and a priest. While those initial 3 are assigned an appearance and name without your input, you can change them later in the game, and you can choose appearance and name for any future party members you recruit. Now, in addition to warrior, mage, and priest, there are some other vocations that you can recruit, such as thief, martial artist, merchant, gadabout, and the new vocation for this game, monster wrangler. There is also another special vocation that you need to obtain specific items to change a character to, but I won't spoil what it is for those who wish not to know. For those who do want to know, just look it up. Now, once a character, apart from the hero, hits level 20, they can change vocations. This sends the character back to level 1, but with the spells and abilities learned from the previous vocation as well as a higher base stat level. You have to get weaker before you can get a lot stronger, and yes, I really do mean a lot stronger. Changing vocations is basically a requirement for the hardest post-game content. With your party all assembled then, it's time to do battle. There's so many great enemies with Akira Toriyama's iconic monster designs that you'll need to smash in their adorable faces. At the beginning of the game, the only character you can control is your hero, but if you want, you can change them to follow your orders from the strategy menu before you start your turn. Otherwise, you can give general strategy tips which will guide them in battle, but you won't control their direct actions. You can also speed up combat in the remake, which is a godsend because the normal pace of battle is laborious. From there, you choose to attack, defend, use spells, use abilities, or use items. Most abilities and attacks only target individual enemies, a few will target groups of enemies, and even fewer target every enemy you're facing. That's where I find the real strategy of group encounters comes from, figuring out which enemies to target to most efficiently finish them off. Do you target the weaker enemies to clear the numbers, or do you focus on taking down a tougher enemy before it can do too much damage to you? The choice is yours. Pretty much if you have enjoyed the gameplay system in any previous Dragon Quest, then Dragon Quest III Remake will be up your alley. There's not a lot of wrinkles to the gameplay, but that's in part because of how strong and well-tuned the gameplay is to begin with. The bosses present a different and greater challenge. This is where I go from the aforementioned group enemy strategy to exploiting weaknesses to fire, ice, lightning, and wind, or potentially status effects, and making sure my party gets the right buffs and heals at the right time. Dragon Quest III gave me quite a few tough fights on the standard difficulty for the boss battles, and I thought that the vast majority were in a fun way. In fact, the exceptions to that overall solid impression usually came when the game veered away from the one major boss with maybe an additional flunky or two to group enemy encounters, boss battle edition. There may come a time when I feel that Dragon Quest's tried and true gameplay philosophy no longer works for me as it once did, but we are certainly not at that point yet. It is probably the most engaging pure turn-based combat system that I have ever played. Now, while exploring around, there is still plenty to do outside of combat. The overworld map is littered with shiny things that you can pick up to get items, equipment, or even money. Also, if you ever think, that tree/rock looks very prominent and different from the others around, try walking towards it and you may discover a secret spot. These secret spots can contain treasure chests, pots and barrels you can check for items or money, and in some cases a monster is there that you can recruit to fight in the arena for you. More on that later. These spots are available both on land and at sea, so keep your eyes peeled. I like the way Dragon Quest included these to keep your focus on the game while traveling around and reward you for doing so. In dungeons or towns themselves, you can also collect treasure from chests, pots, bags, and barrels, and there are even some monsters in the cities and towns. Along with these, there are of course the mini-medals, which you'll be able to exchange at the mini-medal manor for goodies. Pretty much if you see the button to interact pop up as you are exploring around, go ahead and give it a tap. The worst that can happen is a mimic chest, and those aren't too frequent. The only critique I will give the exploration is that some of the dungeons are too convoluted and big. I do believe that this is a remake edition, because imagining dungeons that big in the 1980s edition is a little difficult to comprehend given the limitations on the NES. Especially towards the end, I felt like the dungeons dragged on and on to the point that I was running away from every encounter just to get it done faster. At least on the overworld you can sail around to increase the speed you travel at. Now, I mentioned monster recruiting earlier because the new prominent minigame for Dragon Quest III Remake involves finding these friendly monsters and then building a team to fight at the arena. You'll be fighting against other teams of monsters, and while you can give your team some strategic tips, you will not be commanding them in battle. You'll just have to hope that they are strong and clever enough to pull off victory. If they do, you'll receive some fabulous prizes as a reward, and if you don't, well, you'll at least get some money to hopefully offset the entry fee. For the monster recruiting itself, some of them you can just walk directly up to, but others require you to do things such as mask your scent, hide yourselves, or silence your footsteps. That is, unless you have a monster wrangler. They can recruit all monsters no problem, and it makes sense to do so because the monster wrangler can gain more powerful abilities based on the number of monsters you recruit. However, I enjoyed the challenge of doing it without the wrangler. Time of day also matters when it comes to recruiting monsters, which makes sense since you get different, more powerful monsters when exploring around the overworld at night versus the day. I found this section of the game worthwhile since I liked the arena battling and figuring out how to recruit the monsters, and there were plenty of good rewards from doing so. One of the things that impressed me when it came to the presentation is how they made sure the art style paid tribute and emulated the style of Dragon Quest games while distinguishing it from other HD-2D games like Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy. I probably should have had more faith given I'd seen them do the same with Live Alive when that remake came out, but I think that Dragon Quest III Remake's art style fits the game and series well. The backgrounds are far less pixelated than a title like Octopath Traveler, and that enhances the detail and gorgeous rendering of the areas. There are memorable cutscenes with intros to boss battles or admiring the scenery that were well earned given the work put into the art. Comparing this to the original footage for the remake is night and day. I do wish that the camera would remain in third person for battles like it does for more modern releases in the series, but I understand that this was probably a limitation they put in to increase the budget they could use on the aforementioned scenery and backgrounds. The game does feature voice acting, which was overall pretty good. Given the lack of significant character writing though, there is only so much the voice acting would do for the overall game. As for music, the orchestral tracks are the way to listen to this iconic original music writing, and while the soundtrack does not have an extensive track list in a game like this, you don't need an excessively long one. Congrats Sugiyama, this is the best soundtrack I've heard from you, if only you weren't a war crime denier. Now the UX starts off great with the option to have the game highlight on the map your next destination. Having us choose is great for players who want that extra assistance and those who want something closer to the original experience. Other UX additions include being able to use the spell Zoom from inside, the faster battle speeds I mentioned before, and being able to dash. The UI largely just looks modernized, but there are still some overall additions such as buff and debuff marks next to the character's health bars while planning your turn. Dragon Quest III Remake looks very good and plays smoothly as well. Not having played the original, it's hard for me to say how the game holds up as a remake. From my perspective as a new fan of the series though, I had a great time with Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake. While there were occasional bumps in the road of said enjoyment, they were small in comparison to the fun, and now I'm feeling both prepared and hyped for Dragon Quest I and II remakes in a little bit. What did you think of Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake? Let me know in the comments, leave this video a like, and subscribe for more RPG and other game content. Have a great day, and happy gaming.